Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, a patron prompt brings us to the world of the law. But before we get into that, remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to follow us on social media, go to our Twitter over at Let's Worldbuild. Or if you want to get in contact with us a little bit more easily and a little bit more directly, you can go to our Discord channel where we have all sorts of great discussions happening over there pretty frequently. Of course, if you're feeling particularly generous, like our patron Commissar Whiskers with their prompt today, you can go to our Patreon where you'll get access to patron-only exclusives like episodes, Discord channels, and double-length episodes, which is this one. We're going to get into it, but we're getting there. With all of the shilling out of the way, let's get into the prompt. Again, a big, huge thank you from one Commissar Whiskers, longtime patron, longtime listener. And their prompt is, I'm pulling from a couple of recent episodes for this prompt, but the story revolves around an uncompromising agent of the law. They enforce the values of the socialist utopia the nation fought so hard for not so long ago. Not everyone is satisfied with their lot in life, though, so they lie, cheat, and steal to get what they want. Those people dread the attention of the agent and their compatriots. The tenets are, the government restructuring was less than a generation ago, but many relics of that time are around. Residents have taken to decorating and repainting them to try and diffuse the oppressive feelings of the past. The second tenet is the old society was built big and wide. The entire story could easily take place within one district of the city. Out of town exists, but most residents will never see it. So, with all of that out of the way, we dive right into it. Let's see what Peach Trees is all about. So, Courtney, why don't you get us started today? Tell us what's so dreadful about this world, or not so dreadful.
Yeah, so to address the decorations that were discussed in one of his tenets.
It's children blood?
Well, we'll see.
Oh, damn it, I was joking, Courtney, no!
No, it's so the decorations and paintings that the residents have been doing on those relics aren't purely aesthetic, because in this world, the visual nature of objects relates to their abilities and functions. Kind of like the orcs in Warhammer 40k, where they paint stuff red to make it go faster.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I can definitely support that. So there's a psychic imprint whenever they're painting or creating art in some way then, right?
Something like that. Like, I don't really have a detailed thing in mind for this. It could be some sort of technology, it could be psychic stuff, it could be something magical, but whatever the case, it's how they decorate objects affects how they function.
That's amazing, and I love it.
So art has a material effect on the world.
Yes, exactly.
As opposed to art now, which doesn't?
Yeah. Art does not have a direct effect on the world.
Art has done nothing for no one at any point in any time during history.
Literally nothing.
Yep.
Never.
Oh yeah, what I mean is like there's more steps involved for art to have an effect on the world, whereas this looks like it's a direct material effect.
Yes, it's more, yeah. I tease Daniel, because I mean, we're artsy folks, right? You know, let's just not get drowned out in the corporate nonsense, right? Right. Yeah.
So maybe that's like even what had happened, like the old society, the old government. I'm picturing like this very capitalist, lots of like chrome and advertising and stuff like that. And now this sort of socialist utopia has arisen, and they've ripped apart all the advertisements or redecorated them, repurposed them into some other thing.
I do appreciate the idea of repainting a corporate logo to give it a new sense of purpose or like function. You know, like that's kind of an intriguing concept that we can run with.
I'd be curious to see what's the mechanism for it happening.
Yeah.
Obviously we don't want to define it yet, but You know, whether it is like you're saying a magical effect or a technological effect or something else.
It's midichlorians, actually.
Oh, yes.
Midichlorians.
Yeah.
There we go. Simple.
Tell me all about that bacteria.
Oh, God.
They spray some midichlorians on stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, question. This is a complete fucking tangent. I don't care. I need to talk about midichlorians. You brought it up. Can't you just inject midichlorians in your body? Like,
right?
Like, how come everyone doesn't have access to the Force all the time?
I mean, once they're fucking technological like that, anything's possible.
Right.
It's fucking dumb.
Like, how is the entire universe not focused on like biomedical innovation through midichlorians?
Just sucking them out and dumping them on embryos.
Right, yeah. Like okay, look, if motherfuckers can revive dead people, like, how is that not the most heavily researched thing in the world?
They should be like hunting down Yodas and just squeezing them like oranges.
Squeezing them or juicing them, Daniel? That's what you're really gonna ask.
Way.
Yeah.
I guess that's what Mando's trying to do, but whatever.
No, that is not what Mando's trying to do.
You saw that weird ass lab where they're going to take him. They're going to squeeze him.
Oh yes, okay, squeeze. Yes, I thought you were suggesting that they were going to palpate, but no, that's no.
Oh yes, that's exactly what they're going to do to him.
What the fuck?
It's short for Palpatine.
Oh,
That's why.
My God, that's how he got Palpatine as the name. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, this is a fucking. We are not even 10 minutes into this episode. And we are so off the rails already. Hell yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's bring it back.
Yeah.
Speaking of corporate nonsense, right? I'm going to suggest that a major force in the world are the remnants of a fascist corporatocracy. Ooh. And those are the people who are not satisfied with their lot in life, right? So they're trying their best to reignite and to revive this fascist corporatocracy that was previously in power. That's my first tenth.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense to me. Like remnants of perhaps an extremely bourgeois class, you know, that held a lot of power and now have been disempowered.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, like if they are the remains of the wealthier families from previously and they're trying to regain that wealth and that power.
In status, too. It's one of those things where it's like, my money once brought me status. Now that's no longer the case. How do I get status if I don't have money? You know, like the kind of like deep-seated core values that capitalism can actually infect upon people, you know?
That opens the door too to some interesting, like if you had a terrorist faction and this were more of a communist society instead of like purely socialist, when you could have like factories that the government has reclaimed that they're attacking, you know, that used to be theirs.
Oh, like yeah. Like that's kind of the underground movement, you know? Okay, so there's a big movement in conservatism to suggest that conservatism is the new punk rock, which is
what?
Oh yeah.
What?
No, it's a complete load of shit, obviously, right? Because
interesting.
But I like the idea that like the rebel force are actually the bad guys in this one. And it's like, no, the rebel force actually just want fascism back. So the rebels aren't always the good guys here. You know, what I mean?
It's an interesting reversal for sure.
Yeah. Like, I think that's kind of a fun conceit that we can mess around with as well.
I mean, you could even, depending on how you wanted to write it, like one challenge, for example, would be, because it would be kind of like an Ayn Randian task of making the rebel capitalists somehow very sympathetic and their cause interesting enough that you sympathize with them. Like that would be a task and it would be very interesting to do. Not to say that's what we're doing, but I mean, like that would be like a cool challenge.
No, I'm right there with you. Like, I think that is an interesting conceit. However, my brain is just like, no.
Yeah, I don't think we want to do that.
Like 404, like hard.
Really, you know.
Yeah. Although, I mean, realistically, right? Like, I think there's a fairly simple way that you can square that in that the traditional sense, right? Or like the traditional trope is rebels are the good guys, right? So just by introducing a rebel faction implies, okay, we got to pay attention. Okay, so
underdogs, right?
Right, exactly. And then like maybe part of that narrative conceit or the fun part of it is just, oh wait, no, they're awful. Like they're really, they deserve to be put down in a rebellion. What?
Yeah, no, I do think that it would totally work if you like start telling the story from one of their points of view and then at some point reveal like, wait, you're just doing this because you can't like shit on poor people anymore? Like that's why you're doing that?
No, it's the natural order must be restored. And of course, their natural order is one of hierarchy. So, kind of have to have that. So that's a fun way that we can do it, actually. If this were a narrative conceit, you start with like younger people who are like, oh, I guess this socialist utopia is kind of cool. But then like there's underground rumblings and there's just the allure of rebellion is enough to get them like looking at it, right? And then they fall into the movement and then they suddenly realize, oh, fuck, this is awful. This is not what I want at all, actually.
Yeah. I could also see it like this faction relying on what I brought with mine about the aesthetics. If they're like, how normally it would be like you would find these like rebel graffiti things all over or like people trying to create art as part of a movement, but these people are actually scraping away stuff to reveal like the advertisements and the logos and all that.
Oh, that actually is power, because then their weapon might be propaganda, like painting back the ideas of capitalism into the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea that it's not painting back, it's stripping away the artistic coverings.
Oh, because maybe their method is opposite, like they're taking off. Oh, I see what you mean. They're taking the art that's been drawn by the socialist utopia.
Exactly. And then like, taking a chemical stripper and just like scraping the paint off. So,
that's really cool.
Yeah, that because it's nullifying an artistic expression, right? It's not adding anything. It's removing.
Yeah, which is exactly what capitalism is. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's that's a great idea, Courtney. Absolutely. Yeah. Daniel, we're transitioning over to your first tenet, sir. What do you have for us?
I just wanted to add clarity because one of the things I could see easily happening, which neither of you have gone that direction, which is fun. One of the things I could see happening is like saying this utopia is actually corrupt or has some dark seed in it and it's actually bad, or saying this is a Judge Dredd post-apocalypse, blah, blah, blah. What I want to say is that this utopia actually is a utopia. And as far as it has achieved things like post-scarcity, it is not governed corruptly. I mean, I'm sure it has its problems. And like we were saying, there's clearly like a budding remnants of its past that are haunting it. But I want to establish that this is a good place that has achieved something good. And I would go farther to say it's not just socialist, but it's communist.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of funny because I definitely had just assumed that it was good. But I appreciate that you brought that in as this is factual.
Yeah, so I also actively didn't want to like say, oh, it's a corrupt, no, because that's been done to death.
Exactly.
But also, it's like it's far more interesting because now this isn't a tenet of mine, but it was certainly something I was thinking of, right? This agent of law, they seem somewhat fascistic in some ways, right? But they're a necessary part of a governing body. Where it's like you need strict enforcement somewhere, even if it is someone like this, right?
Right.
So I think it is narratively rich to explore something that sees a necessary fascistic element, even though I'm actually thinking that it's not accurate to call it a fascistic element, but an authoritarian or an authoritative element, right?
Oh, yeah, and that's why I want to short circuit the possibility of saying like, oh, the way this perfect society is maintained is this fascistic figure like sacrifices people, like something like that. That just is not really a utopia because you have the Star Trek episodes where there's very paradisial kind of worlds, but they have some hideous like totally unacceptable thing that maintains them. Like I don't want that. So whatever this law person does, like sure, it could be brutal or it could be like very authoritarian, but I'm hoping that it's not like fundamentally unethical,
Right. And that's kind of what I thought was narratively rich and exploring was the kind of conflict that arises where it's like, we have these ideals and they try and uphold them, but they're also like on that border. It's like, sometimes you can't always do that.
Right. Or it has to be harsh. Like there's a story I was playing with a while ago where it had like a very futuristic society that was trying to see what would a communist sci-fi seem like. And one of the principles I had is that if you violate specific laws that are really important, they just exile you from the planet completely because they can't, execute you or harm you in certain ways. Right. They just literally exile you. But that's a pretty harsh thing, right? So like that's the kind of things where I think that's acceptable and it doesn't really violate ethical, dilemma, created an ethical dilemma necessarily.
We're kind of creating a Superman who's not omnipotent, right?
Yeah.
Because the narrative power of Superman is a person who has all this power and yet still chooses to do good with it, right? Like that's kind of like the hopeful, narratively interesting aspect of Superman. But
Exactly.
when we strip away the kind of like thing that makes him omnipotent, it's like this is a person who has all sorts of legal power, all sorts of power in terms of, like who they're literally judging or whatever, but they still have to be that paragon of, the utopia, right? So again, that kind of like interplay, that kind of friction that's involved, like that's really interesting to me, I think. So side tangent over, I think that's a really cool and interesting way that we can further explore this kind of setting.
Yeah, definitely. And I also wanted to ask Daniel, especially for our listeners, could you like give a obviously very brief and simplistic sort of differences between socialism and communism?
Sure. Maybe I can use the words of Marx himself.
There we go.
The definition of communism, according to him, is a society in which private property has been abolished. And private property for Marx doesn't mean personal property, so it doesn't mean houses and cars. Specifically, it means things that produce capital, and capital for him means things that are generally processes or properties that create profit without directly benefiting the laborers who make the thing. So, for example, a factory, the laborers work for someone and they're paid a wage, but the factory generates a lot of profit for the owners. And so that's capital. And so that kind of ownership would be seized by the state because it basically disempowers the commune.
Right. Imagine that every job that you ever had, right? You didn't own it for the most part.
Right.
But let's say that all the people in a local coffee shop, they all shared the profits, right?
That you could have.
Every worker co-op exists. Yeah.
Right.
So also there's no landlords because there's no housing problems, also landlord as an occupation shouldn't exist anyway. Anyway.
And then to answer the question about the distinction between socialism, like from a political point of view, there's a lot of definitions of socialism, but as far as Marx is concerned, socialism is this state between capitalism and achieving communism. So it's basically, there's supposed to be, according to Marx, a violent revolution that achieves communism. So somewhere along the way, you start to do the things that communism requires, and that's socialism.
Right. As Uncle Carl said, absolutely. All right. So we've got a pretty interesting setup for the world already. Normally, this is where I would kick it back to Courtney, but I wanted to toss in my weirdo one now because I kind of have a weird tenet this time. My second tenet is the people who are not satisfied with their lot in life, as Commissar Whiskers said. The people who dread the attention of the agent, right? Their dissatisfaction manifests in a way that essentially turns them into supernatural creatures. So, for example, we could have a vampire or a werewolf or something like that. Basically, what I'm interested in is this dread-like figure is also a Van Helsing type figure, where this corrupting influence of like capital is
They're
not
like
just
literally vampires.
it's not just ideological, it's physical, it's literal.
Awesome.
So they're stalking through the city. It's like, oh no, we've got X problem. So yeah, that's what I wanted to toss out because I thought that sounded cool as shit.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just thought it was so funny. I love it.
I love it. Yeah.
I'm happy I'm getting this reaction because I'm like, this is kind of a weird one, but I kind of fucking love this idea. So
yeah,
that's what I'm going for. So mixed with my cultists are like the kind of faction of like, hey, we're trying to revive this ancient thing. It's also like they're trying to revive ancient vampires or mummies or like an ancient society that has like all sorts of supernatural monsters.
The concept of capital.
Yeah,
the very concept. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
The parasitic ideal underneath it all,
Correct. Yes. And when I say vampiric, right, or like when I'm suggesting supernatural, I would like an updated look to this. So it's not like a traditional vampire with fangs or something like that. I'm thinking like a vampire who has the tropes of the vampire, but like updated for a more modern sensibility.
Yeah. There's so many options there. Yeah.
Right. I want to keep it loose and open because I think that's a cool idea. But that's what I want to toss out.
Because now I'm like seeing, oh my gosh, like what's the art style? Courtney, you can give me a hand here. That is it Art Deco? That's kind of like the Ayn Rand style.
Yeah, Art Deco.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like picturing fucking Art Deco vampires. Like I love it.
Yeah, hell yeah. I feel like Art Deco vampire is something that you could put into a fucking AI generated.
Can we do that right now? I'll fucking do it right
now. Go for it. Yeah, let's see what happens. All right. So yeah, I mean, mine's real simple, if not a little bit weird. So Courtney, now we'll get back to you in our regularly scheduled rotation. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I love that. But yeah, my second one is that there is a technology or magic of some sort that allows the various parts of this civilization to communicate with one another quickly over long distances. But recently, there have been efforts by those unsatisfied individuals and groups and vampires, apparently, to obstruct or even destroy that so that they're better able to commit their crimes away from the watchful eye of the law.
Interesting. So they're interested in disrupting communication, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I suppose this is a question that we now have to ask, right? What's the technology level that we're looking at here? Because I'm expecting something that is somewhat near futuristic, right? Like Commissar Whiskers doesn't actually give us any kind of like timeline necessary, but my brain, again, because it is so like, one, we have Dread as kind of a baseline, and two, we have a communist utopia, right? Like I'm assuming that this has to be like 2200 or something like that, right? Or where do you see the kind of timeline in terms of technology being?
I still am like all over the place with that. I could see it like future definitely makes sense, but I could also see this being some weird like medieval Renaissance thing, or you brought up Van Helsing, so now I'm kind of picturing that sort of era too. I think it could go any way. I just don't know which one I want to commit to yet.
I think there's an opportunity for doing something really wild, like because we've done a lot of cityscapes recently, I think, like mega cities. Well, and at the same time, like I feel like the feature you introduced of like art having this material effect on the world would push it away from something that's more hard sci-fi-ish. So I'm almost interested in like an Art Deco Spelljammer kind of planescape world. Like, wouldn't that be crazy if it was like, it's not just one city, like maybe it's like multiple, I don't want to say plans because we do that a lot, but maybe it's like a landscape that's not a normal physics kind of thing.
Right. Well, remember that one of the tenets that we're working with here as well is the idea that it's built big and wide.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like we could play with that.
Right. So again, I'm thinking of like Mega City 1 and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
But how do we turn that into something that is a bit more outside the box, right? Or
yeah, that's
different.
What I mean.
Yeah, I'm with you, Daniel.
Yeah, you were saying Art Deco, so is this like Roaring 20s kind of thing with like fun. Art Deco style skyscrapers and stuff?
Yeah, like that's what I'm picturing, maybe. But maybe it's like, I mean, it could still be cityscape-like, but I just want to be some factor of like weird to it, or it's not just like a city, you know,
right?
Or just a mega city, because that's like we've done that so many times.
I think there's a reason for it, Daniel. Mega cities are cool.
They are pretty cool.
Like, what about like Mindscape sort of city? Like, I'm thinking, what's that terrible movie? Inception. You know, where they like have these wrapped around. Like a wraparound, so maybe a city on like a
like a ring world kind of thing.
Yeah, we never one of those. That's what I was thinking. How did you pull that right out of my head? That's exactly what I was thinking. Something weird, because that at least is like a giant ass circle. It is broad. They built broad. You know, it would be the grounds for post capitalism, because that would have required some insane capital to build.
Well, okay, let's keep Art Deco in our minds, though, right? Like, can we use that as a kind of like aesthetic veneer
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
And then apply that to like
Ring world?
a ring world? Yeah.
I mean, I'd be into that. You could even have like the sun, quote unquote, in the center of it because it literally is. But like from a fantastical perspective, like they're kind of removed from that concept.
It's an artificial sun, by the way. It's not an actual sun. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm
That's cool.
totally okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we have like roaring 20s aesthetic with near future technology, right? And we can justify that by saying, well, this is sustainable long term. And the ways of the past of corporate greed and consumption led to unsustainable forms of technology. So you could also have it be this interesting dichotomy where using high tech is actually seen as somewhat taboo or seen as like morally unjust in some way. So if that's the case, then you'll have like this agent who is like, oh shit, I have to use this technology because the bad guys are also using this technology as well, right? It's not an arms race necessarily. It's just like maybe there's like a cap or a ceiling to what we're talking about here. Is that interesting to y'all, or is that something that's just like whatever?
Maybe we can be more specific, like maybe specifically technology of production as opposed to like just high-tech stuff, as opposed to like a laser gun, using a factory or some large scale thing. Well, that's more in line with the concept.
Right. I'm just thinking like in Cyberpunk, for example, right? Mass consumption leads to cyber augments being everywhere and commercialized and stuff like that, right? To the point where you're going to get defective parts that crap out on you. And so if you get these new branded eyeballs, you will go blind unless you replace them over time. It's about mass consumption that is not helpful in the long run. So if we apply that here, it's like, yeah, we don't have cybernetic implants, even though we have the capability of creating something like that.
Oh, so maybe not mass-produced products. Like
yes, exactly. So like if you have a cybernetic implant, it's because you had like a life-threatening injury and this was the way that you had to be saved or something like that. Where the technology exists, it's just used judiciously. It's used properly to the point where it's not like, oh, it's a fashion statement.
That would make craftsmanship more important, right? And like kind of back to Courtney's point, like craftsmen make individual things.
Yeah.
So it could still be high tech, but it wouldn't be like mass produced. Say like you have a craftsman produce a thermal jacket that someone wears for cold weather, right? That one was made specifically for you or for a small set of people. Whereas there are factories that could generate 10,000 of them, but we don't use them that way.
Another way to look at it too is like if there was that technology for automated production, but it was repurposed to actually make things that last as long as they should. Yeah. So like instead of the forced obsolescence of like, for example, today's capitalist world, where, we have the capability of making products that last for fucking ever. But because of greed, they basically make stuff break after a certain amount of time.
Right.
So if that was like turned
or force you into a subscription service for it, right?
Exactly.
Like, appliances have that shit now.
I know.
It's like, what's going on? Jeez. Anyway.
It's fucking great. Yeah. But so if they actually use that in the way that it should be used, which also then leads to like people then have more free time to pursue stuff like the arts and creative pursuits because they're not constantly, working towards buying the latest whatever.
Yeah. I'm so glad you went there because I'm like, yeah, of course, if we have this technology, it means that we're going to have a lot more free time because like we're going to get to that point where humans will really only have to work 20 hours a week because we have all this technology that's automated and stuff like that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah. And then you can also have, those craftsmen that you were talking about, Daniel, like the people who do these like really high quality things. Maybe they customize things for you so that instead of everybody walking around with like the same branded t-shirts or whatever, like you can get stuff that really suits you as a person that
or you just make it yourself because you don't have the time to learn how to do it.
Sure. Know? And then applying like the whole aesthetics related to function, you could do all sorts of things with that too.
See, I'd like to live there now.
I know.
Right? Yeah. Okay, wait. I have a dumb word in my head and I need to toss it out there. It's called a techsmith. It's not a blacksmith, it's someone who makes like artisanal like technology or like electronics, basically.
Mhm.
If this is like a kind of fairly high-tech place because they're on a freaking Niven ring, I bet they have like maker technology or like printers, you know, like super sophisticated 3D printers. And they can certainly use those to make critical infrastructure components to print stuff, but they probably don't want to use it to print individual products.
Right.
So that's why that's kind of forbidden. Yeah, it's like forbidden to do that because we know we can make long-lasting materials with them instead of doing that. I mean, and then on the same point of the giant ring, you talked about communications technology. If it's big enough to encircle an artificial sun, that's an insane distance to travel. Like we're talking about like the space of an inner solar system, basically. So that would mean you would need ways to travel that were either really fast or kind of network infrastructure that deals with like faster than light almost communication, right? Because if I'm on the Earth and the surface of this thing is Earth to Mercury or Earth to Mars, there's a delay there, right? So that could be part of that technology,
Interesting.
Cool. Okay, first of all, it has to be a train of some kind. Like it has to be like a train that is on, there's the inner ring and the outer ring, right? So there's two trains, well, there's multiple trains, obviously, that run parallel, but they're basically like the fastest monorail that you can get on, right?
Yeah. Oh, I like a monorail.
Yeah, monorail seems kind of on theme, and also if you want to go with like Ayn Randian, like
in aesthetic, I was about to say that.
Yeah, like of course that's kind of what you want to go with, right?
Weird and steel. That must mean there's some special steel here.
Oh God, yeah. Okay, we'll leave that up to the libertarians, Daniel.
I detest her, but I actually like her novel, like, and I like her as a writer, which I know is terrible to say.
No, that's fine. You can appreciate art and still detest the artist. I mean, like, that's absolutely
it was surprising. It just, I mean, I know a lot of people hate her writing because it's like clunky and dense, but I don't know. There's something about her writing that I actually like.
I'm not here to judge you for that, Daniel. Look, if I can like Roman Polanski, even though he's a fucking monster, then you can like Ayn Rand. Okay. Hey, look. Fucking, it's a good movie. He makes good movies, okay? Like, I know he's awful, but like, come on, Rosemary's Baby still holds up.
I mean, I'm right there with you. Art's art. It has a separation,
Sometimes it's hard to separate, though. Like, for example, well, you know what? I'm not even going to get into that. That's a fucking side conversation that will last forever. So, We've still got Art Deco vampires to get through here, but before we move on to that, let's talk about communication, because you're suggesting that they're trying to knock out communication and gain control of those areas through that kind of lack of communication, right?
Yeah.
So, like you said, Daniel, communication is going to take time. So what's kind of interesting about that is that there's room for error. Right. So if they're so far away from people, it's like, oh, we haven't heard from this place in a couple of days. Right. Oh, that just might be the relay taking time or something like that. There's some plausible deniability there. But it's like, we haven't heard from this colony or this area in a couple of weeks. Send the judge. Because by then, some shit has already gone down. And so a response team is then necessary for them to go to. And that's actually an interesting way that you can literally frame this as an RPG, right? And it's modular too, where, we haven't heard from them in a while, send them out to this area. Okay, what do we know about this area that we're going to? And then you get the mission rundown. There's so many interesting things that you can do with that.
Yeah. And the train, you can envision that however you want. Like I can see we have to get on that train to go to the inner ring. And it's like, the train could be a literal train. It could be like some kind of weird teleport pad. It could be like...
I want literal train, by the way.
It could be one of those crazy like energy transport rockets like in Epcot or something. Who the hell knows, Or the tubes from Futurama.
Yes. Yeah. So the reason I like the idea of an actual train is because then you can have stuff happen on the train in transit, right?
Right.
And mind you, because we're so far in the future, the technology is like, it might seem interplanetary distance, but it's basically like, we're taking a luxury cruiser. So, it's going to take a day or two to get over there, even though the distance actually traveled is closer to interplanetary distance. Or something.
Like a less sadistic Snowpiercer,
I'm going to say a not at all sadistic Snowpiercer.
Right. It should be not at all.
Yeah.
Or what's that show? Galaxy 9, is it? with Hugh
Hefner.
Laurie?
No idea.
It's Hugh Laurie. It's like a space.
You're talking about Red Dwarf?
No, it's new. It's it's
then
like
I have no idea.
what's the word for like a fancy plane, like a something liner or a fancy cruise liner? Cruise liner. It's kind of like a cruise liner. Is that what they're called?
It's called Avenue 5.
There it is, Avenue 5. She got it.
What did you call it? Galaxy 9?
Galaxy 9. Close.
Close.
That's what I was picturing when you said like a nice, pretty train, monorail.
Yeah, like that's what I'm interested in, is this idea that it's like, because I was thinking about this when I was traveling recently, right? Where like I went to Europe, and back in the day, in order for me to go to Europe, I would have had to have boarded a cruiser and spent like several weeks just to get over to Europe, right? In order for me to get over there and have my vacation, or like a week or a couple of days. And that idea kind of fascinates me, to replicate that, but over like interplanetary distances, where you can have your own little mini adventure while you're on the train, hobnobbing with people as they're traveling. And it's a glamorous thing as well. There's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do with it.
I also like that it brings focus onto what in this setting would definitely be public transit.
Yes.
As
absolutely.
opposed to private vehicles. And I do think that's kind of key for the setting, this
Agreed.
like communist utopia. I also want airships, because this is Art Deco.
Ooh.
And I feel like it fits.
That's for short distance travel.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Like long distance travel, you got to hop on the Lightspeed train.
Yeah.
Well, not Lightspeed, but you know what I mean. Well, actually, it could still be Lightspeed, technically, I guess, right? Daniel would tell me all about that, I suppose.
Daniel, you've been summoned.
I mean, you would probably have, for the long speed, the train, I imagine, is like supra light speed, so like slightly faster than light speed, but then like interplanetary would probably be like low light speed,
Okay. We'll have to do the math on this later, but like from here to Mars, going light speed, how long would that take?
Oh, I can look that up, but just by comparison, just remember that like light takes like 8 minutes to get from the sun to us. So it's not huge, like if we're going at light speed. So
Right.
I mean, I feel like I can look it up while we're talking, but I feel like if our rail works by light speed, then we could probably get throughout the solar system pretty quickly.
Right.
And then sublight speed would be your airships, I guess, that take months and such to get from A to B.
Right.
So I'll do some Googling in the meantime.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah. Well,
Mars.
unfortunately, Daniel, you're the last one with a tenet.
Oh, okay.
So
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
3
So-
minutes?
It's pretty quick.
To Mars, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's okay. So we're actually sublight speed then.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
don't need to be that fast.
We don't even need to be light speed then.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
That's good, because then it actually makes it easier to deal with. We're not dealing
Yeah.
with like contradictions.
Exactly. Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, we're sublight speed here. So it'll take like, I don't know, you want to say like 2 weeks to get to Mars, something like that?
Yeah. So then we've got like some sophisticated spaceship kind of monorail deal.
Right. And I'm talking like distance, mind you. It's not like actually going to Mars from here. Because remember, we're all in one big rim
Yeah.
world here. We're all in a big
Yeah.
circle.
Even if you made that a flat plane, I can't imagine it. I mean, I could be wrong, but I can't imagine it extending beyond Mars as far as point to point.
Right. So this is probably like the furthest we're going to have to travel,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Look at this. We're doing science over here. All right. So Daniel, go ahead and knock us out. What's the final tenet for this episode?
I had one, but I want to give everyone an option because I feel like it could just not be worthwhile. So I'll give you an option of 2. And you guys can decide which one you want.
Okay, well, hit us with the one that you don't want to present to us first, because that's frankly what I'm more interested in. Because you know me, I like the challenge of forcing something to work.
So, and now the key word in the sentence is not meant to be taken literally. So what I had was an alien threat from outside the society threatens to destroy their way of life. So alien can mean foreign in some way.
Interesting. And the second one.
Alternative to that, because I'm thinking about the law, is that perhaps the law is substantiated in some form of artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay. So alien, of course, being metaphorical here, or perhaps literal.
Whichever one makes sense for us.
Right.
Mhm.
Where I am, I would prefer a metaphorical alien.
Yeah.
I don't know about the rest of you.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. So why don't we combine those two, Daniel? Why don't we have the existential threat, the alien force, be a threat to the AI law that's going on, or something like that?
Maybe. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I think
I like
that's
that.
kind of a fun way that we can kind of approach it.
Maybe the law in some way relies on a form of AI decision making, because you've got such a huge landscape to deal with and a lot of people's priorities. And in communism, like the bureaucracy of the state still exists, even though the state doesn't exist. In the
Oh, but
sense
it's
of like,
sped up. The process is sped up.
right,
To the point where it's actually functional.
right, and there's huge populations, so it's like it could be a way of using AI for bureaucracy.
Yeah, it reminds me of iRobot, the book, not the movie. I haven't seen the movie, but in iRobot, it follows this progression of robotic technology from like very basic stuff all the way up to full-on artificial intelligence. And I guess spoilers for this old book, but one of the kind of laws of robotics is what is it, like do no harm to humans, or like essentially aid humans in the best way. And it ends up that AI robotic people end up taking over secretly, because that is the best way to keep humans from being harmed, is if humans are not in control, essentially.
Which makes sense to me. I mean, all hail our AI overlords.
Yeah. I mean, I see what you mean, right? But like, I can't full-throatedly support something like that.
I mean, I could see in this world, because it's so complex. Like we're talking the surface area of the inner solar system. That's insane. That's bigger than the sun, right?
Yeah.
So if that's possible, like in order to coordinate that and to not have like interstellar fiefdoms, which is what would it devolve into, you'd probably need some distributed intelligence. But that also points back to Courtney's technology that makes the communication almost instantaneous.
True. Yeah.
Because in order for the AI to operate on that scale, to be able to communicate with itself as one thing, you would need faster than light communication.
Yeah.
So that must be how it functions, you know. So disrupting it would be disrupting the law.
Ooh,
I like that. That's good.
That's
I like
awesome.
that. Yeah. So again, you're taking anarchists, you know, but they just happen to be fascist anarchists. That's all. But like knocking out communications is a way to knock out like law. Yeah.
The law. Yeah. Itself. Or the superstructure that protects, that makes the law have physical. Because like in the communist state, you don't reinforce class through violence, which is what we do now. Like if I steal from someone, the way the state enforces that, the way the state enforces that is through violence. So in this society, I don't know how they enforce things, but it seems like the AI intelligence is what does it.
That question will be answered in the next episode, I'm sure, because that's something that we definitely need to talk about. Because I agree with you entirely. Because if we're going to have a utopian society, then rehabilitation needs to be the ideal, not punishment, right?
Yeah.
Which means that you might have a rogues gallery of recurring villains or something like that.
Oh my God, that's great.
Yeah. Or alternatively, you can actually have redemptive arcs, or you can have villains who come back and aid people in the actual good because they actually are good.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
There's all sorts of things that you can do with that. So yeah, we'll talk more about that next episode though.
Yeah, I really like that. And too, I like the idea that AI is so necessary for keeping the law functioning, because when you do have something like this large and you're trying to enforce equality and egalitarianism, like you need something to notify you of like the implications of every single action. Like if you do X over here, how is that going to affect this group of people over here? And it's sort of like impossible for like a human to keep all of that in mind. But when you have this AI that's overseeing everything, it actually makes that possible.
Yeah. Like I said, it makes bureaucracy go from like a process that takes months or weeks or even days, and it simplifies that down to seconds, right?
Yeah.
So it allows bureaucracy to function because it removes that human element, that human error, all that good stuff. Yeah. But we still have to figure out what the alien force is that's interrupting this AI thing. Or do we want to just drop that entirely?
I mean, it could simply be the corrupting influence of your rebel capitalists. I think that is foreign enough to the way it's set up to satisfy it.
Okay.
Yeah. It could also be like, I mean, I assume that given this civilization is established on this ring world around an artificial sun, like they must have originated elsewhere. So maybe the originator group is coming and they're evil space capitalists or something.
Oh, you mean the original society that preceded this?
Oh, that's interesting as well.
I mean, that could, I think that ties in, it dovetails, right? Because we established that the rebel capitalists are essentially trying to resurrect that. right?
Right.
Yeah.
And now, again, we're bringing it back to prestige television. This is something that is hinted at in season 1, but doesn't actually start to happen until like season 3 or 4. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're still in season 1. Let's focus back here. Okay. I love this. I love this setting so much. I'm very excited about this. Let's go ahead and do a quick recap. So, Courtney, you started us off today. What was your first tenet?
Yeah, that was that those decorations that residents have been creating on the relics mentioned in the prompt aren't purely aesthetic, because here the visual nature of objects relates to how they function. And I brought up the example of the orcs in 40K where they paint stuff red to make it go fast.
Right, the log. Absolutely. Okay. Do we feel like that's been satisfied enough?
I don't think so.
I think we've talked a lot about how it could be used, and like we tied it in, Rob, with your idea for the sort of rebel group. But I think we could build on that more.
Let's make it a little bit more impactful to the setting, right? So how do we do this? How does this impact everyday life?
I mean, one question I have is like, how does it actually work? Like,
yeah, I guess
like,
that's an issue.
That's my first question, you know?
Well, what I suggested when Courtney originally brought it up was when you're painting or when you're creating this artistic expression, you're infusing it with intentionality, right? So when you're creating something, you're also like giving it purpose, and like you're suggesting that, oh, this color will make it faster, make it stronger, do something like that. And it differs depending on how you express that, right? It's pure artistic expression.
I mean, the question I'm more asking is like that. I think that is helpful in knowing how it functions, but like, how does it work on a more sci-fi way? Because we move more close now to something that has scientific explanation,
right?
So I'm like wondering, does it derive from some bizarre technology? Like, what is its basis? That's my question.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, remember that we're not entirely science-based here, because we do have my supernatural kind of creatures as well with the corrupting force.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, maybe that ties in too. Like,
yeah, I was going to.
They're like being corrupted by the stuff
related?
that they're actually seeking, like the wealth, the capital, the greed, and such. And this is like the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. Like, do they have like the common origin, and also like they may not be obvious what the scientific explanation is to people, but if we do have a Niven giant space ring, that means that we're setting this in a sci-fi, so we have to have some sort of like commentary.
Well, it could be sci-fantasy. Just tossing it out there. But well, okay. So all right, let's think about it this way then, right? Is the paint? Well, I don't like this idea because it kind of takes away from Courtney's thing. But like, I like the idea that once the paint is stripped away, that's where corrupting influence starts to creep in, right? So you start to see people who are afflicted by unpainted areas become supernatural ghouls or zombies or monster, whatever, right? But what that does is that it takes Courtney's expression and it turns it purely into a restraining force. And I don't want to do that. I think that we can do something more interesting with this idea. But I like the idea that they're connected.
I could bounce off that. We talked about them having, at some point in the past, capitalists had to have developed this maker printer technology, right? That mass print stuff. Maybe that has, the way that it partially works is it requires intentionality. Like when you print something, you kind of like link up to it and you think about the thing you want to make and you imbue your intention, and that's kind of how it gets generated. So maybe the old maker technology that's out there, the capitalist remnants, that's what they're painting over, quote unquote, and it has a psychic influence. But the new maker technology, when you paint with it, when you print with it, basically, you're infusing your now communist intentionality over it. And that's why you get like the Lisa Frank communism. We had the brutalism that we had before, right? Yeah. And that negates the influence of the old remnant, right? So maybe it's the printer tech has some sort of bond with its user, perhaps. It could even be that it's an AI unto itself, and it bonds with the person to help print, and the old AI was designed to create capital.
Yeah.
What I really like about that from a thematic standpoint is there's no denial of the past, right?
Yeah.
It's almost as though like, hey, this used to be its function. This used to be how the world functioned. We're not turning a blind eye towards that. we're building upon that and recognizing it
Mhm.
as something that like this is
Yeah.
part of our past and we're moving towards a better future, right? Like
Mhm.
there is something about like the acknowledgement of that I find really intriguing. And I really like that idea, Daniel.
It's like an extension of the past, you know, a
Right.
reinvention of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
A reclamation of the past, even. Like, yes, this is who
Mhm.
we were, but now it's not who we are.
And we can play now with the vampire capitalist rebels, like their supernatural abilities, because
Mhm.
you know, what if they found a way to integrate capital into themselves, and that's what transformed them. You know,
Ooh, yeah, that's really
Mm.
right?
Oh, so what they're doing is they're taking that old printer, that old maker
Yeah.
technology and infusing it into themselves.
Yes.
And that's how the
Yes.
manifestation
Yes.
works.
Ooh.
And then
Yes.
we don't need to explain that because it's just fucking cool, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Oh, fuck yeah. Let's go. We did it. Oh, man. I definitely peaked the microphone. I'll go, fuck, that's awesome.
That's
Hell
fucking
yeah.
like, do you remember oh, what is that theorist? I'm sure you've encountered him. He wrote about capital in Dracula. Oh, what is his name? This makes me think it's like literally the sci-fi version of that. Is it Althusser? No.
Althusser is pretty old.
Let me look it up. Capital Dracula. Oh, it's Frank Moretti. That's it.
No idea. I've not
No,
heard
I
of him
haven't
yet.
heard of that. That sounds interesting though.
He tries to talk about Dracula through the lens of like Marxism and
Right.
thinks of Dracula and his old money as a form of capital and like the
Mhm.
corrupting influence of capital. I'm like, oh, this
Oh,
is like the
definitely,
sci-fi
yeah.
version of that. I love it.
Yeah. We've definitely talked about something like that
Yeah.
in terms of theory and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely. This works beautifully. I love it. I'm a big fan. Courtney, do you feel somewhat more satisfied now? Have we left you satisfied?
Yeah, I think this is great.
Great.
And I think it leaves us with a lot of stuff to build on next time too.
Excellent.
I am stealing this for OSR's sci-fi
Of
setting.
Of course you are.
When
Daniel,
it comes around.
Come on.
Mhm.
I knew this was going to happen like once
Yeah.
like halfway through this episode. I'm like, Daniel's stealing this for OSR.
I'm stealing
100%.
this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Obviously.
I
Like,
need a
come
sci-fi
on.
setting. So like this would be a really cool one.
Yeah.
Well, technically you have
Ride the Lightning.
Ride the Lightning as a
Yeah,
sci-fi
although
setting.
I slotted it technically in steampunk, but it
Yeah.
is technically sci-fi-ish too. You know?
Could go either way, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, moving on. So my first tenet was the remnants of a fascist corporatocracy are rebels. They're the disruptive force. They're the people who are upset with their lot in life, and they're the ones who fear the agent of law, the judge,
Yeah.
if you will.
Mhm.
Our fundamental vampire capitalists.
Yeah. I feel like we've made them front and center.
Yeah.
We've talked about them a lot. So yes, I feel like I'm very satisfied with how they've turned out thus far.
Mhm.
And Daniel, your first tenet.
Mine was simply to clarify that the government is A, communist, and B, actually a utopia.
Actually good. Yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And then I think we looped back around to, right. I actually stole the center spotlight because my second tenet was the people who are evil corporate fascists, right? Their greed, their vices, all the bad stuff within them manifests in a way that creates a supernatural being. So I use vampire as kind of a shorthand because it's culturally easy to kind of click to, but like realistically, it can manifest in a number of different interesting and weird ways. So that's my second tenet.
Yeah. I can't wait to explore that one.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, I wanted like the law figure to kind of be like a Van Helsing as well as a Judge Dredd. So yes, I think that'd be really interesting.
Sci-fi Van Helsing is cool.
Yeah,
Very,
absolutely. I thought that'd be really cool to see.
I never think I've seen that before. Have we seen that anywhere? I'm sure it's been done.
I'm sure
I've never seen it
somewhere.
myself.
We're just not aware of it. You know?
Yeah.
Actually, if you've heard about something like that, tell us about it by sending us a Discord message or emailing us, whatever. It's all good. So, Courtney, your second tenet, remind us.
Yeah, mine was about the communication. There's something that allows for rapid communication over long distances, but recently the unsatisfied individuals and groups have been trying to obstruct or destroy it so that they can get away with their capitalist crimes.
Yeah, and I feel like we explored that really well. It also pops up again in Daniel's second tenet, which was...
And a couple of things that if alien or foreign threat threatens the society's way of life, and that the law is somehow determined by artificial intelligence, which
Mhm.
we determined that technology, the faster than light or near light or faster than light communications, is necessary for the law to function as a bureaucracy,
Right.
and that the monorail also comes out of that.
Yeah, I think that we've managed to create a really rich, interesting setting thus far, and I'm really excited to see how we explore it more in the second episode.
Yeah, I really love how this is going so far. It's very cool.
Absolutely. So a big thank you to Commissar Whiskers for this setting. And to end the episode, we're going to roll for the twist. And the twist for this episode is...
Please not anime, please.
So our twist for this episode is now remove some blood sacrifice, aka make it nicer.
Oh, interesting.
Huh.
I completely agree. Yeah. This is the anti-Courtney twist. Just like add some anime it's the anti-Daniel twist.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. We get to make it nicer somehow. I think we kind of already hinted at that a little bit from our previous conversations, but I'm very excited to see what we do to reconcile this. That's going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. Remember that if you want us to build your world like we did with Commissar Whiskers, you can always go ahead and email us or go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to come and follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at Let's World Build. Or you can come and join our Discord and chat with us more directly, where we will be more apt to respond to your questions and all that good stuff. You can come tell us all about everything. It's fine. Yeah, just come join our community. It's fun. It's cool stuff. And if you're feeling particularly generous, or you just want 2 episodes for your setting, or you want any of the other myriad fun things that we give our Patreons, you can go to our Patreon with a link for that in the description of this episode or over on our website. And with all of that out of the way, that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.